Welcome to That 30s Show, a podcast where we talk about the good, the bad, and the surprising parts of our 30s. I'm G, and I'm finally 30. I'm excited to find out if 30 really is the new 20, because if it is, then the best years are yet to come.
And I'm David. I'm entering my mid-30s. I used to have no back pain or trouble sleeping, but now I live off a healthy diet of self-help books and dream of being in bed by 10 p.m. every night. Join us each week as we try to figure out together what life in your 30s is all about.
Welcome back to That 30s Show.
Welcome back, everyone. It's almost January's almost over. My gosh.
I know. I was just going to say Happy New Year, but I think we've said that already. But I think people still say Happy New Year up until the end of January.
I think so. I got a text from a friend who I haven't connected with since the New Year, and then the first thing was like Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I guess we haven't said that to each other.
Yeah, and then you say it again in like February because it's like Lunar New Year, and then you're like Happy New Year again. But
So January is Happy New Year. February is Happy Chinese New Year for those Chinese people out there. And then March is what, like Happy Easter?
Happy Spring.
So I think this week we want to go back to something we haven't touched upon since our very first guest episode, right?
Yeah.
We sometimes try and find a theme or conversation topic to sort of unpack, dive into. And so what do we want to talk about this week, G?
Well, this week we are going to talk about dating in your 30s. Yeah, that's
specifically in your 30s. Because that's a whole other kind of worms.
Yeah, I feel like there are some topics that we've talked about like multiple times, like, you know, hanging out with your parents or like friends. Stuff like that. But we've never talked like in depth about dating. So this should be a fun episode.
Yeah, I'm excited because we've both dated, like, you know, gone on dates and stuff in our 30s. Well, you just turned 30, but I'm really curious to hear the sort of how you compare, your most recent dates to your dates like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't talked about it since Audrey came on. So if anyone's listening and you haven't listened to Audrey's episode, I think that was like episode 6. Yeah, I definitely recommend you go because she has some hilarious dating stories. I don't know if we're as interesting as dynamic as Audrey. Certainly.
Or as structured in our dating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll try and share some of our insights and stuff. Where do you want to start? Why don't we start with like dating in our 20s, just to get a bit of context, like, because everyone's quite different. I think I have a very different, experience or style to you.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, and I also want to point out, funny, like you mentioned Audrey's episode, it was also funny because I was I was listening to the first few episodes a few months ago, and I was like, wow, the first episode that we ever did, David was, like, we both mentioned that we're both single. And then by the second episode, David was like in a relationship. And it just like, to the outside eye, it just seemed like you moved like super quickly because you started talking about it was the Valentine's Day episode. You talked about the flowers and to line up for it. I thought that was just really funny because it was like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah, I always think back to that as an inadvertent way to advertise to the world my updated relationship status. It just happened that way. It wasn't planned. I kind of wish I didn't say that in episode 1, to be honest, because now everyone knows my timeline. It's relatively private, at least in terms of the public sphere.
Yeah, that's funny.
Thanks for reminding everyone.
No, okay. Let's go back to the 20s. Dating. So, I don't know. So you think we have different dating styles, I guess?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just don't really. I'm not someone who puts myself out there as much as I think you do. In terms of like parties or like, I don't know, like
meeting new people and stuff.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't think we're either of us on apps in our 20s. When we say 20s, let's say early 20s.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking about that, and I can't remember when the apps really got like, I don't know, popular or like socially acceptable. Because before, I feel like if you were on the apps, it was like such a you know, because it was like stuff like OK Cupid or like
Yeah.
eHarmony or whatever those like old dating apps were, where you had to like do a subscription or whatever, and it was so taboo. Like if you were on a dating app, it was like, what? Like,
Yeah, like,
are
what
you
is wrong with you?
50? Like, what?
Do you have no people skills?
Yeah. So I can't remember when it got like socially
Oh, I
acceptable.
can't remember either.
And like even when Tinder started, I think that was kind of like the first app. People were still like, "Ooh, you're like on Tinder? Like what? That's, you know, like."
I will say, I remember distinctly being on Bumble when Bumble first released. Like, because I remember there was almost no profiles on there. I was one of the first, not one of, but like, you know, among the first generation of Bumble users, because it just came out and I was like, oh, it's a new app. Let me try it out.
Yeah, I don't even know if Bumble is like a thing anymore. I don't really hear about it, but maybe it is.
Yeah, I think
know.
it's less popular.
Yeah. But I do remember like in my early 20s, like going on the apps, but I feel like I kind of kept it like hush hush, like between the friends, because I didn't want to be like, I'm on Tinder, because people were still meeting each other.
In terms of how you meet people, that's definitely a big thing. I've heard of people saying in their 30s, or just Googling sort of the sentiments out there. It sounds like there are some people who go off the apps more when in their 30s because they're so done with that and they want, I don't know. But from my experience, you go on it more because it's just so much harder to meet people.
Yeah.
So how did you meet your dates when you were in your early 20s? And maybe after you share, I'll tell you sort of how I met my like the medium of communication that I connected with my previous relationships.
It was mostly through the apps, to be honest. Like there were some that were like,
really?
you know, friends of friends at the time. Cause like now I know basically all of my friends and they're friends of friends. So it's like, I don't have like as wide of a
You've exhausted
stranger.
yeah.
I don't have as many stranger friends, I guess. But at the time, yeah, there were like people that I met. I mean, I didn't really meet anyone through university, to be honest. Like I was like my classes, we talked about this before, my classes were huge and it was hard to meet people. And then like the very few clubs that I joined just like didn't really meet people. So I think even from the early 20s, it was mostly through apps.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, so we were both part of the same extracurricular sort of nonprofit student organization at university. I don't know about you, but that was a gold mine of potential.
Oh, really?
Dates. Yeah, there were a lot of eligible bachelorettes in that club.
Well, also in my early 20s, I just wasn't really looking for that either. Like I was, you know, like
really?
I would go on dates and stuff, but mostly I was just like having fun with my friends. So I don't think I really put in any effort towards it. So
to be honest, and actually speaking of which, one of my previous relationships, it was a very short one, so I don't even know if it really counts, but just in terms of not talking about my history per se, but like, oh, how do we connect with people? So one of the people that I dated, I did meet through like a student leadership or like a club related thing, an extracurricular activity.
yeah.
So that was one that was not on the apps for sure.
Yeah. You met him in the wild is what I like to call.
In the flesh.
Yeah.
And then I think there's another one I met through like a mutual friend at a mutual friend event kind of thing. Like went to an event, didn't know most of the people there, and then you know one of the people there I met was like that.
Yeah.
And then the past couple ones I've connected with, there have been mostly apps, maybe like one or two. So I feel like for me, at least, there's a trend where some of my older relationships when I was younger were all through in person, and then the last one or two were through.
Because you're less exposed to that now, I guess. Like, you know, you join different clubs when you're in university, you're more exposed to like different groups of people and like meeting new people.
We've talked about how like I've joked like, gee, like you got to play like volleyball and stuff. That's one of the those sports, those group sports where there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
You can connect with a lot of folks there.
I know. That is a good way to meet people nowadays. Like, because it's like, I don't even know where else you would meet people. Like, yeah.
So like you do, for example, you do dance, but there's no guys there because
it's like all girls studio
or whatever. Yeah. You do boxing. Are there guys at boxing?
I just don't, I probably don't do it like consistently enough to like meet people. Actually, like the dance studio is actually a great place because they have like this area where members will talk to each other before the classes and stuff, and you really get to like
Okay.
meet friends and stuff like that. But I don't
Yeah.
think a lot of studios have that. It's kind of like you go in,
Okay.
you come out. Sometimes you might see the same people over and over again, but it's, yeah, I don't find that there's like that much talking time with the different classes.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know how
What
they do
about
it these days, but
what about, everyone who's a gym person, and you certainly are a gym person. I hear on, on the TikToks and stuff, the gym crush. Does G have a gym crush?
I do not have a gym crush because I
What?
think, okay, so first of all, at my old gym, a lot of the
boring.
times that when I go, it's like old men that go at that time. So at my old
Why are
gym, there
you
wasn't
joining an
anything.
old man gym, G? Like what?
I know. Well, it's the time that I go. Maybe I should go at a different
Oh.
hour. Like at 5 a.m., it's mostly like the old guys who can't sleep and they get up and go to the gym.
Okay.
And my new gym, I don't know. I haven't seen anyone yet, but maybe. Who knows? I don't know. But
I imagine, like,
crush.
I'm not a gym person, even though I try to be, but I can see how that's a very common way to not meet someone necessarily, but certainly have your eyes out for it, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of fit, attractive people at the gym,
Yeah.
because they go to the gym.
I've had friends who met through like the gym. So
Oh, really?
it
Like
is-
they're like dating now and
it-
stuff?
yeah,
and they go
yeah.
through the gym?
yeah, it is possible.
Wow.
So
Because
yeah.
it's like a common interest, right? Like immediately off the bat. It's
Yeah.
just easy to connect with like that.
And you know that they would go to the gym at the same time that you do, so they probably
Yeah.
have a similar schedule. So that's
Yeah.
a bonus. But something I did want to mention in the like on the dating apps in our 20s, something that's like super noticeable, like a noticeable shift, is how long you talk on the apps before you go on a date.
I had that on my list to talk about.
It
Yeah.
is such a distinct contrast between like your 20s and your 30s. And even as like a girl, because I mean, a lot of the times the guy would ask, me
Yes.
out. And so I think in my early 20s, I would be like alarmed if the guy would be like, just say like, hi, do you want to go for a coffee? Like, I'm gonna be like, why is there no like conversation first? I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. But now if they like drag it out for more than like a few days,
You're
I'm just
like,
like,
I'm over
come
it.
on.
Yeah.
I'm like, you want to
I
go
think
for a coffee?
like that's certainly true, and I want to unpack that a little bit. But that's also not just the chat. It's not just the chatting. It's just in general. I think a big difference between 20s and 30s is that in your 20s you have a lot more patience to indulge, long conversations and more dates and stuff. But in your 30s, you're just like, all right, let's, you first once you see one or two red flags, you're like, yeah, let's keep it moving. Next
Yeah.
one, next option.
It's so true. Because you're just like, it's also because in your 30s, I feel like you kind of know what you want more. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what those like red flags are versus in your 20s, you might not. And you're just more casual about it. But I remember distinctly in like my 20s, I think there was this guy that I talked to for like 5 months.
Oh my
Over
God, and you
the
never met up?
over the chat.
What is this,
We
so,
met
like,
before
fucking
we met
pen
up.
pal?
Like it was like
Oh my God.
right. We were talking for
Yo.
like 4 or 5 months, and then after we met up, we are like, oh my God, finally! Like, holy.
Oh no,
Yeah.
that's just an insanely unproductive and unnecessary amount of time and
Yeah.
energy to invest into anything like that. Damn, it's like back in the day, G had a pen pal in Vancouver.
Yeah. Like we might as well have been dating after like 5 months. Like by that point, I just don't know. We just kept talking and talking. So it's interesting.
Like when I talk to some guy friends and we joke around, or just ask about like, oh, how's the dating going? And he's like, oh, any new girls on the apps? And he's like, yeah, talking to one and haven't gone out yet. I'm like, well, how long have you guys been talking? And then anytime he's like, oh, it's been a few weeks. I'm like, yo, what are you waiting for? Like that girl's like moving on, buddy. Like, come on.
Yeah. Well, yesterday I actually had this conversation with my friends about how like guys are not like it's hard for a guy to tell when it's ready, when it's time to like ask the girl out or to like make a move. Like it's hard for guys.
I appreciate your empathy for us. It's not,
Yeah.
you don't have an easy job.
Yeah.
We don't want to come across as too aggressive or too
Right.
or too desperate.
Right.
But at the same time, we don't want to come across as, too passive and unconfident and shy. So like, how do you draw that line?
And that line is so fine. Like it's like the finest line. Yeah.
It's different for everyone. So like, let's
Totally.
for example, for me, if I were to be on the apps right now, or at least the last time I was, I think I want to talk for. Well, it also depends how regularly you're talking. If you got one of those people who's just like sends you one line a day at most, you're not even getting a conversation going. But if you happen to manage to catch someone and you actually have a real-time live conversation, you know how rare that is on apps to actually have
we're both on at the same time.
Yeah, and you're not playing it cool. You're like, sometimes, I've been guilty of that where you're like, oh my God, you're applying already? Like, you're just like, you're like, come on. Go get a live. Stop talking to me. But if you actually have a live conversation, it makes a huge difference than just having basically an email thread through the apps where you're sending each other one paragraph a day. Oh, it's so exhausting.
I really hate talking like on the apps. There's been no app where it's easy to message someone on the app. Like you always got to take it off like the apps, I feel, if you want to have an actual conversation.
Yeah, no, for sure. But in general, on average, for me, whether it's like the email thread version, which is annoying, or the real time version, I think on average, I would say I would want to chat for about 2 weeks. And then, maybe like after 1 week, you set up a date for like the week after. So in total, you have like about a 2-week buffer before you meet up.
Yeah.
2 to 3 weeks, depending on sort of how frequent it is. I think that's me. Is that sort of
for me, I don't know if I actually have like a time, but it's more like how much we've been chatting. So, for example, for what you just said, if we've been chatting back and forth for a few days, like regularly, and it's not like the one paragraph a day type of thing, then after a few days, like if he's like, want to go for like a coffee or a drink or whatever, I'd be like, sure, like setting up for the next few days or whatever. So it kind of depends on how the conversation is. Sometimes guys, like, I can appreciate this. Guys are pretty direct. They're like, hey, I just don't really like small talk. So like, do you just want to like meet up for a coffee and then we can like get to know each other there? I can appreciate that. So I don't really mind that.
So from a girl's perspective, or at least from your perspective, because you can't speak for all girls, but as a girl and someone who's had that experience, the hardest thing for guys is like knowing how to open that conversation. And most guys, I shouldn't say most guys, many guys are just not the best conversationalists. But even if they are, it's like even for me, I think I'm a good conversationalist. But when I'm starting at like an app conversation, I'm not going to drop the one liner. It's just too tacky for me personally. Yeah. So it's just, I like to have genuine conversations. I think everyone who listens to this podcast is not surprised to hear. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, like, how's your weekend going? Yeah. So from your perspective, how do you like the guy to start a conversation?
Yeah, that's a good point. I've had like,
roll your eyes when they ask you, how's your weekend? How's your day going?
No, because I feel like that's just, it's hard. Like, it's hard to start off with something that's like, meaningful. Like, I think how's your weekend going could be pretty good. But then like, can we like segue into something that's, a bit more meaningful? I've put a few like prompts on my profile that I think, if they read it, and sometimes they'll like respond to it. Those are the ones I think I like the best, where they'll like ask me about a picture or like ask me about a prompt and stuff. Because then you can start a conversation.
Not too hard.
Yeah. And I try to like do that too. Like if I'm the first one to message, it'll be because there's something interesting that I saw on their profile that I'm like, where was this? Or like, tell me more, You know
what's the worst? When the other person has no prompts and you're like, girl, come on. Like, are you even trying here?
Yeah. I don't even like, I think it's swipe. Cause sometimes they'll be like, they'll put the one word just to fill it in. And it'll be like, period. I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, what are we supposed to talk about?
Or if their prompts is like something just the most boring and basic thing. Like, I don't know, like, oh, I like to drink coffee. Like, I don't know, like, you and everyone in the world, come on, give me something to work with. I mean, coffee's not bad.
It's like
interest,
we'll
but
get along if you also drink coffee or something
yeah,
like
is
that.
this the most interesting shared interest that you think you're gonna be able to find? Is coffee? If so, like we got nothing to talk about.
Yeah. No, I think that's both on the girl side and the guy side that would happen.
I hate online dating. That's a whole nother conversation. We could probably go into it more, but I want to do sort of unpack some of those like 30 differences because I think those are pretty interesting. Well, actually, one question I wanted to ask is just based on your gut instinct.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy, or did you find it more fun to date in your 20s or now in your early 30s?
Oh, probably in my 20s because I wasn't really like thinking about stuff as much. Like you said, I had more patience or like leeway to like talk, more open to different sorts of interests or like what they did or like what their goals are and stuff like that. And I just feel like now I'm more like laser focused, and it feels like if it honestly feels like a job. Like I'm not, it feels like a second job, right? It's not. I wouldn't say it's as fun anymore. It's more like, okay, this is what I'm looking for.
It's more business-like.
Yeah. Which I
agree 100%, actually.
Yeah.
And when I was asking myself that question in preparing for this podcast, I was like, yeah, dating was so much more fun in your 20s because you don't have to like, I don't know, if you break up, you break up. Like you got all the time in the world and you don't have to dive into the like how's your financial stability, how's your emotional maturity, how are you with your family, like what are your values. Like you want to get to that, but you don't have to get to that until you're in a relationship. Right? Or at least you're focused on different things. I think I think it's something how it's framed one time that I like is that in your 20s you're prioritizing passion and quote unquote love, right? The feelings and wanting to be just infatuated and swept away and wow, they're so attractive and oh my gosh, so much fun. And now it's like, even if you do feel those things, you're like sort of self-imposing those breaks. I'm like, all right, girl, hang on.
Yeah.
Think with your head. Does he love his mom? Because I don't, even if he's got 6-pack abs, but he doesn't love his mom, I can't do this.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not as fun. It's not as fun now.
Yeah.
It's more serious now, right?
Yeah, it is definitely more serious. And you can tell too, like even the other party is the same. Like you already know that when you sit down for that first date, like the two people are likely judging each other by like, can I see this person as like a life partner? Like
Well, you're not really having that mindset in your 20s. You're just like, I want to have fun. I want to feel good.
Yeah. No, totally. I think that's a major difference, which is, kind of sad, but such is life.
The other thing that comes to mind that makes it less fun is not just so much the fact that I'm in my 30s, but whether you've been in a lot of relationships or whether you haven't, it's still the same, which is that you've had to go at this dating thing for so many times and for so long. It's just not fun anymore. Like I'm more jaded. So for example, this whole idea, if like, let's say you start developing something more serious, you don't have to be in a relationship per se, but you're talking for a couple months and you've been on a few dates. Every time you have that process where you have to repeat your whole freaking life story.
Yeah.
That part I hate.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh God, I got to open up to a whole another person, tell them about all my trauma and all my fears and all my hopes and dreams. And, it's like, oh God, like, do I have to do this again? I've done it so many times now.
I know. Like, what are your hobbies? And you have to like, you should put it in like a notes app so you can just copy and paste it into your, into the thing. No. Yeah, totally.
Like, I'm more jaded, I have to say.
It's a lot. And, like I used to really enjoy, well, I still do. I enjoy meeting new people. So that part, like going on dates and stuff, I think is still pretty fun. Like you get to meet people and talk to them and like hear their life story and stuff like that. But it's like, I mean, the part where you have to talk about yourself, that gets kind of old because that's the same thing over and over again.
But like, and that's a part like where I feel bad though, right? Because if this is serious or if this is someone I'm in, you're starting a relationship with, they deserve your whole story and as patiently and as vulnerable and with as much vulnerability as possible because you got to put 100%. But
because this is like a new person, like who knows nothing about you, so you do have to like give your 100%, right?
yeah. Just because you've done it so many times before doesn't mean that you can, take a shortcut this time. Be like, well, no, because they don't know you. So yeah,
it's honestly
tough.
exhausting. It's so tiring. Sometimes it's like, I mean, one thing that I will say that I really don't like about the apps is that like you can't really be friends first. Like you can't, develop that relationship.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's going into it. You know what they're there for.
Pros and con.
Yeah.
Pros and cons there.
Yeah. It's very intentional.
Fun. Yeah, it's not as fun because it's like there's no more it's fun. It's the courtship, and I don't know, I sound like a freaking old man trying to talk about this,
no, I
the courting process. There's some like mystery, and there's we've been doing it for centuries and millennia. There's something in it that is I don't know, meaningful or but then now you just got to take all that mystery away.
Yeah.
And
it's like a deal, like a business.
Yeah, it becomes a
transaction.
business meeting. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you? Yeah, I don't know if you can even try and make it less transactional if you are on the apps.
Yeah,
but at the same time, it is a pro, right? Because at least you're like, okay, thank God we're not beating around the bush. Like we know our intentions.
Yeah,
we don't have to.
That's
like,
true.
Oh, do we like each other?
It's just, I mean, like traditionally, if the apps didn't exist, I would think that you would like befriend someone and then you become friends and then maybe like feelings will develop, blah, blah, blah. But that takes like a really long time too. Cause I mean, at least that's how it worked in like, elementary, high school, university. Like first they were your classmates.
There's a whole process of like, do they even like me? Like that's a whole, there's a whole stage there. And there's none of that with the apps.
Yeah. And you have to base it on like so little that you base it on their pictures, first of all. And, I do find that guys aren't the best at taking pictures. I'm not going to lie. Like some of the selfies are like, why is this blurry? And then, you have to base it on a few prompts that they do. Maybe they're like the most interesting person in the world. And if you met them out in real life, you would totally click, but you kind of miss that when you're going through the apps.
Yeah, I will say it's sort of like almost like a masochistic thing where I remember it's fun and also just miserable to have to go through that process of like, do they like me? Well, they did this and they said that. They said, hey, with like 4 Ys. So like, they're kind of into it, right? And, like, and you're just interpreting every text message. You'd be like, well, would they say this to a friend? And then, I'm asking my guy friends like, yo, this is what she did. Like, she wants to go to have lunch with me. Like, that's not normal, right? You know that whole like thing. It's kind of fun, but also like fucking terrible. So it's kind of like a love-hate thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I know what you're talking about. I don't know if I can relate because I take things as face value. But yeah, I mean, I think I know what you're talking about.
What like? Well, but when you're not on the apps, right? You don't know if the guy likes you.
Oh, when you're not on the apps, yeah.
So I think the number one thing, we haven't really touched upon it yet for me in about dating your 30s is that for my experience, that the biggest thing that just hangs over the entire process and in every conversation is the timeline. And we sort of touched upon it today, but like the timeline in regards to essentially marriage and kids.
I haven't really experienced that yet.
What?
So,
because you're still young?
There has been some conversations about that, but I wouldn't say it's like a prominent discussion topic.
Okay. Have you had this conversation with your girlfriends? I certainly have with my female friends, or just heard about it. How they sit down and they're like, okay, I want 2 kids, and I want 2 kids before I turn 35. So if I do the math, I gotta. And I want to make sure I date someone for 2 years and then get engaged for 1 year. Like that's my minimum. So that means I needed to have met my boyfriend 2 years ago.
Yeah. I've totally done that math inside my head. Yeah. Oh, I thought you were talking about like that's a discussion that you and like dates have.
No,
okay.
Yes and no. It's as in like it sort of hangs over. It's sort of the elephant in the room, especially if you are both at, let's say, yeah, if when it comes to kids, if the female's a certain age, or if you in the app you both said you want kids, it's like, well, because we're talking about 30s, you're very young. So if we're having a conversation with someone in their when they're 35, right, in their mid 30s, like I think it would for sure be a thing.
Yeah, I do find that more and more, like as I moved into my 30s, like the talks about like, you know, kids and marriage, like they come up maybe more often. I wouldn't say that it's like something that's like always talked
Well, maybe
about.
because I am 4 years older than you.
Yeah.
then
Well,
that's-
yeah. I mean, now for sure, like the topic of like, do you want kids, or like how many kids do you want? Like that kind of comes up way more frequently than when I was like 20. That like never came up as a
Yeah, fair
discussion
enough.
point. Like, do you want kids? Because back then we were like, whoa.
So everyone who listens to pod knows that you want kids, and I assume on the apps you say on that field, yes, for kids, or
I think
are
I
you?
did.
What do
Yeah,
you put?
I probably did.
As someone who does value that to a relatively high degree, do you tolerate and or accept a guy who says on the app, or even if you meet them in person, if they're like, I'm not really sure, is that good enough for you?
I have always said that if I like met like my life partner, like this, my life person, and they
Soulmate.
felt really strongly that they didn't like want kids, I think I'd be okay with that. But like at this point, I'm on like the dating apps. So it's more like if the person doesn't want kids, that's already like it's like, okay, then no. I guess because it's not like that I've already met my soulmate and then they were like, I don't want
Right. You have
know
to
what I'm
look
talking
through your
about? Like,
choice because you're
yeah.
swiping through options. Like, well, I mean, you might be my soulmate, but you're probably not. So why do I have to try and take the time to try and
Yeah,
figure
it's
that
not
out?
like I
I'll just
already
swipe
found
left.
my soulmate and they don't want kids and I'm like, okay, fine, sure. But now I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, if you don't want kids, then you know, whatever. Unless that guy, like, I really, really, really like that person, but so far I haven't found that. So I do tend to, I don't know, gravitate towards the people who say they do want kids. So
The other thing that and so interrupt me if you want to add one of your points, but I got a list here. Another big difference I think between dating in your 30s and 20s is the finances in many different ways. Finances in terms of the quality and content of what the dating looks like. And
yeah.
also in terms of the outlook for your life. I think, for example, I remember, someone I dated in my early 20s or even maybe just around when I was 20. It was like, well, my dad, Chinese girl, like, oh, my dad probably does care a lot about your career and where you're headed, but like, it's okay because we're still in university right now. So if you don't have it figured out, just tell. Because I was like, oh, what do you say when I meet him? Just tell him like your general plan and like. But there was like some pressure, but not really. As in like, it's okay if you haven't figured it out. It's okay because we're still in university. But now I can imagine whether you're a girl or a guy, I think you want someone who has their career more or less figured out. Is that safe to say? Or has some financial stability? Do you have a minimum? We've talked about in our friend group. Oh, what's your minimum income? A minimum requirement for their income. Do you want to tell me your thoughts about all that?
I mean, by 30, I would say definitely. Like, if they are still like, I have people who tell me like they're 30 or above 30 when they're like, yeah, I don't really know what I want to do. Like, I might try out some of this, some of that, but I honestly don't really know what I want to do. And I'm like, is this normal? Like by 30, something that you still don't know what you want to do? I mean, live your life, I guess. But for me, like, I'm definitely looking for someone who has, a career.
Yeah.
But I think that honestly started in like my mid 20s. Like, I feel like I wanted someone who was kind of on the same level or like path that I was in terms of like where I was in my career and my studies and things like that. So, some people obviously go to grad school, which I didn't. So if they were, I would consider that on par, like with a career.
Okay,
but
so there's two different things we're talking about. One is someone who has direction and conviction and, perseverance and discipline, that they're working towards something. That's one thing. But the other thing is just when it comes down to it, materially, how much are you raking in? What resources are you providing for our future family and our relationship?
Yep.
And how can you provide for me and for our future kids? Like, these are two different things. You could be, and so I think one of the main differences that at least for me is in your 30s, it's a lot more about the resources. It's like, well, how much do you make?
Yeah. I mean, I do think about that. Like if, when they tell me their job, I can kind of like maybe ballpark what they're, and like, yeah, I mean, I don't have like unrealistic expectations, I don't think, but someone who is comfortable, stable in their career and things like that, I think is important.
But there is a requirement there, right? Whereas like when you're dating your early 20s, let's say someone's working a minimum wage job while going to grad school or something, or it's their first job and it's like, I don't know, 40K or under. It's like, that's fine. But you're not going to date someone right now who's working minimum wage, I don't think. I don't know. Is that... Damn, am I a bad person for saying that? I don't think so. Come on, we live in Vancouver.
Yeah. I mean, I think they've definitely got to be kind of like on par with you. Like, it's because you need
to. That's the thing. It causes challenges in your relationship. Not that you can't overcome them, but I think there is added challenge when there's a huge financial discrepancy.
Totally. I think so many arguments and fights and like challenges arise when there's a financial issue, right? And it is like the root of a lot of things. So to be realistic, you have to be able to make a living so that you can live comfortably in Vancouver. Because I mean, for me, like when I'm single, I can live comfortably. So why would I find a partner where we would then not live comfortably together, So that just wouldn't make sense to me. So, yeah.
But let's go back to the dating part, because I think that's kind of funny. I don't know if you have any stories, but especially in your early 20s, it's less common to, for example, have a car. Or maybe it's your parents' car and you can't always use it. So, I think it's acceptable, for example, when you're younger, to go on dates where you're taking a bus, or that where you're not picking them up or something.
Yeah.
But can you imagine going on a date now and then going from one place to another and you're like taking a bus to, like, you're like, nah.
I mean, I do find that a lot of people don't have cars. Like if they live in the city, a lot of people just don't. I think they've got an Evo or something.
I'm in a bit of a bubble.
Like,
obviously, I'm in a bit of a bubble where I think everyone I know drives, but it is at least
a lot of people commute.
My colleagues.
Yeah. Something that I've noticed, and I don't know if like from a guy's perspective, if you've noticed this, but like I think in my early 20s, we would go out for more like lavish or expensive dates, versus now it's more like a coffee or like a drink or something.
So interesting. I
would have thought it'd be the opposite, because people are making more money now, but I think it's I think it's reversed, at least in my experience.
Okay. I know what's going on. It is both. It's yes and no. So what's the difference is that now, because you don't want to invest too much in someone because you want to move on quickly, you're not going to go on a first date unless you're me.
Yeah.
You're not going to go on a first date where you're, eating at a fancy restaurant or going to see a show, like just something. You just want to grab a quick coffee, have an exit plan, something where you can just go in and get out. Because in the first 5 minutes, what's up. You're not going to sit down for a whole dinner.
Yeah.
Because in your 30s, you're like, you got things to do. You have standards to meet. But in your 20s, you have more patience for that.
Yeah.
So you don't need to have that exit strategy and have that cheap first date, because you're like, whoa, it's fine. I can go for a dinner with you. That's not a waste of my time, even if I don't end up liking you.
Yeah.
But then I think the difference is that as you get onto your maybe third, fourth, or fifth date, certainly as you start getting more serious or exclusive, those dates are going to be a lot more quality, financial wise. Whereas even on your 10th date in your early 20s, you're not.
It's the same. Or it goes down. You're like McDonald's after the 10th date.
Yeah, it's just a movie or something, right? Like whereas now you might go see a show where every ticket is like $100 or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was strictly thinking first dates, but that you make a good point. Like, yeah. And honestly, from my perspective too, like I always suggest like a coffee date or a drink date out, because I I also am like, let's
You want
make
that extra
this
strategy?
let's make this, kind of quick, kind of chill first, just to like suss each other out, and then maybe we can.
I don't know.
talk
I
to
think
the
I'm
other
an
dates.
outlier. Like I have to say, from the last time
I think
I
you
was
were an
in a
outlier from the get go. Like, I don't know, man. I don't think I've been on. I can count like maybe 1 or 2 dates where it was like the kind of dates that you took girls on. So
Okay, well, hang on. What is that? That sounds that implies a certain thing, which
No.
But let's just no. I mean, not even just that, but just like, wow, no, I'm not that. I think the thing that is different from my experience, at least even the last time around, which is, as everyone knows when that is, annoyingly so. It's weird because I remember, let's say, I think the vast majority of the dates I went on, maybe let's say like 5 out of the 6 dates I went on, or 4 out of the 6 dates I went on, the first date was a sit down meal, and the entire date lasted at least 4 or 5 hours of nonstop conversation.
Yeah.
Or like it was dinner time, and then like I drove her home at like midnight. That happened multiple times on first dates with different people. So I don't think I think that's probably not normal, but that's how it always ends up going for me, because I just love to talk. And don't get me wrong, it's not just me talking, okay? Like,
yeah, I was gonna be like, the girls like, come on, let's go. No. I mean, I've had dates like that too, where it's lasted like multiple hours because we just gone into like the weeds of like, the depth of topics.
I do remember oftentimes I get this comment a lot where they're like, where the other person is like, oh, I don't usually talk about this on a first date. And I'm like, oh, welcome to dating with David. That's right. This is how we roll. Tell me about your family history.
Yeah. That's so funny. I mean, yeah, I don't know now, like if you start talking about all that stuff on the first date, whether it's like in your 30s, whether it's like a green flag or a red flag. I can't really tell. Like when the first date, you're already diving into like all that stuff. I mean, I guess it depends on the person.
It depends on the person. I definitely see how it could be a flag for some, like a red flag for some people. I just don't have the patience to surface. I just want to get into it. Anyways,
okay, I want to talk about one thing that like is not so much the awkward or painful part now, but like early in my 20s, the most awkward and painful part of going on the dates is like the paying, like, and like thinking about that.
Why?
Who like, do I take my card? Like, does it seem fake if I
20s?
try to? Yeah, like, does it seem fake if I try to pay?
How does that different to now?
Now I just like let the guy lead. Like if it seems like he is gonna pay, then I won't even pretend. I feel like I had to pretend to like take out my card and be like, oh, do you want to like split it? It's like such an awkward conversation. That I feel like
for sure.
To have.
I want to talk about that, but I'm trying to understand why it's different now.
It's different now because I don't like, if the guy is pulling out the card and paying for it, I'll just be like, thank you, like thanks for dinner or whatever. I don't try to pretend like I'm fighting for the bill and stuff. I don't know. It's just more. I just don't feel like I want to do that anymore. Maybe I'm jaded and like I don't want to go through that awkward. Like, it's just like more upfront now. Yeah. And yeah, and
no,
maybe now
painful.
it's also because like we go on like a coffee date or like a drink. Like I don't feel like it's too
deal.
Much for the guy to pay. But if it was like, and that's also kind of why I don't really enjoy like the dinners, because I don't know, I don't want someone to pay like that much money for a first date. I feel kind of bad.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I don't know about, the chivalry part or whatnot, but just in general, when you have less money, I think it's actually makes it a lot easier to like AA it, split it and stuff. Whereas now I think, let's say you split it when you're students. I think that's more acceptable and there's less taboo around that, if in terms of, not taboo, but less societal norms and baggage that comes with that. But now if you split it, it's like, I think there's probably a greater question mark. Be like, oh, are you just being really progressive and I can respect that, or are you like poor. You can't afford it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard to know, like, why.
Like if I was a girl and the guy didn't split it, and I'm in my early 20s, I think
Yeah.
I would be like, okay, either you're very progressive or it's realistic. But
Yeah.
now in your early 30s, especially as you said, if we're just going out for even a meal, if it's not fancy, it's not a lot of money in my opinion, and you're not, at least offering to pay for it, I would be curious: is this a progressive, I value equality thing, or is this a someone who has limited resources to provide for the relationship? That's how I
Yeah.
think if I was a girl.
I also, like, I think stop doing that whole, like, trying to pay for it, because I think it's awkward for the guy too, because the guy doesn't know, like, are you trying to be like,
Yeah.
like feminist, like equality, I want to pay, or like I think the guy's probably like, should I let her pay, or like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard.
I know it's just such a tough thing to navigate. But do you find, like, as a guy, have you ever found where the girls, like, do they want to pay? Have they offered to pay?
I have found that I think at least 50% of the time the girls offer to split it. Mm-hmm. But certainly there are many girls I've gone on dates with where they are happy to not pay, and they want you to pay. They want me to pay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a values thing. Depends. I think it's like if you're raised in North America, or if you're raised in Asia, or like where your cultural influences come from. Because I think definitely more traditionally, not just certainly in North America, but definitely more so in Asia, the man providing is a more of a value thing. Mm-hmm. So I think if I'm, seeing someone who is culturally more influenced by Canada or by, Hong Kong or China or wherever they're from, that's probably the part that makes the difference.
Yeah.
I always offer to pay though. I don't know. It's probably something to unpack with a sociologist or a psychologist. But I don't know. I believe in basic chivalry, and I think on a first date, the man should always pay. Or at least
to me,
the man should always offer to pay.
To me, it's also just like whoever asked the other person out, like, pay.
Yeah,
I don't know,
for sure. Like like for example, if I suggest, oh, let's go to this, I remember doing this once. Let's go to this jazz bar, right? And have a dinner, and then there's a live performance, and you have to pay a bit extra for the live performance, and the whole thing is not cheap. I'm not gonna split it, even if, because it's like, I took you here. Can you imagine if the girl like takes me to Beyonce and like, all right, let's split? I'm like, well, I didn't want to do this. This is so expensive. You brought me here. You paid for it.
Yeah. I think that's a good, like, rule of thumb, is if you ask the other person out, maybe you pay. So
okay, one thing that I think is a big difference I do want to make sure we touch upon is in your early 20s, or when you're younger anyway, I think it's more common that when you're dating, your mindset and your approach is different, in that you are potentially seeking validation and approval from your dates, where you want to be like, oh, they like this kind of thing. Okay, let me try and be that. Let me try and hide this other part that I think they won't like as much. Whereas I think in your 30s, hopefully, because as you mentioned earlier, you know what you want more, but also I think the approach is different for a lot of people in your 30s. Whereas, which is in your 30s, you're not going out and seeking dates because you feel like you need someone in your life.
you're more confident in yourself.
And you are just you're attracting, especially for a girl. I think in your 30s, you just want to live your best life, and through that, you're going to attract the right people, and you don't have to go and seek something out because your life is full already. Whereas in your early 20s, you might be like, oh my god, my friends, they're all dating. Like, I want a girlfriend too. I want a boyfriend too. There's more. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Let me try and change who I am to get that person. And less so now. Whereas like now it's like, I'm just going to be the best version of myself. And if that person likes it, that's great. And if they don't, they're not the right person for me. That's a shift. I think that some people experience.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know I have to think about that a little bit more, but the thing that pops into my head right off the bat is that I do remember in my early 20s, I would be more like mindful of kind of like what I say, and like I would get like more dressed up, maybe I would put more effort into like looking really nice for the date and things like that, and like kind of think about think about things a little bit more. Now I'm more like, okay, well, this is me. This is what I look like. This is who I am. So, you know, if you accept that, if you like that, then cool. If not, then that's fine. So I think to an extent, yeah. Yeah, you're probably right.
Wow. Well, I'm just glad I'm not having in a stage to constantly repeat my life story.
Yeah, it is. I always say it's like another job for me. So
yeah.
And one.
Well, speaking of job, you know, the checklist. You have a checklist? Actually, I know multiple people, either I've dated or whatever, who literally they have a checklist. Like they wrote down a checklist.
Yeah.
I always have a physical checklist.
I always have said that I don't, but then I think, you know, like subconsciously I do, because I kind of go through the same thing, like in my head, I suppose. I mean,
yeah.
I think like family oriented is definitely one of them. So, but I always think about that. Like even though I don't have it written down, I'm like, okay.
Oh, you
well,
don't have it written down? Okay.
No,
That's
I don't have the list.
No, I'll say that like my partner, she showed me her list on one of our early dates, within maybe our fourth day or something.
Yeah. Were you like, do I check this? Do I check this?
No, it's funny because she's like, yeah, you don't meet at least half of these things. And I always tease her about it now, because obviously we're together and it's fine. But like, you know, she on her list was like someone who's like at least 5'11", and I'm not 5'11".
The list is bogus. Yeah. That is pretty funny.
I think the point I want to make is that in your early 20s versus in your 30s, I think the checklist becomes longer in a way, because you know what you want. And if you've had previous relationships, you've learned through them. And it's like, okay, I realize this is really important. This is a non-negotiable. And then you're like, okay, another thing to add to the checklist. I know. Like, at least I know from when I've broken up in the past, not for every breakup, but for some breakups, I've like gone on to Word and I'm like typing out my list of reasons why it didn't work out, so I can remember to not make the same mistakes.
Your own dating spreadsheet.
It's not a spreadsheet, but it's like, yeah, it's a checklist.
It's a list.
It's a bullet point.
Yeah.
When I was still very in the thick of that breakup moment, I'm like, okay, these are all the reasons why it didn't work out. David, make sure you find someone who don't have all these characteristics.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard people say, right, like that you should treat this as like a job. Like you should, to think about like, a little debrief in your head about why this didn't work and things like that. And I think that's something that's probably more prominent in your 30s versus like your 20s. You don't like whatever,
well,
like didn't work.
So what's something for you that you find you are really prioritizing or looking for now in your early 30s that you didn't in your early 20s, either through experience or things that you've learned about yourself? Something new that you maybe wouldn't have expected to be something that you really need if you asked 20-year-old G, but now you're like, wow, I can't believe I didn't even realize how important that is, but now I do.
I think it is probably the more like family oriented mindset. Like I didn't think about that when I was younger at all. Wanting to have a family, like being a bit more like stability is sort of like something, because I think when I was younger, like the adventurous kind is more like attractive. Fun. Yeah. I think I value
off my feet.
Stability a bit more now than I did previously. Yeah. But I do find that like this is not a character trait or whatever, but I do find that the one that like after I go on a first date, and some of the dates are like so painful in the sense that like the person just doesn't talk. Like they were a lot more talkative over text, but then when we met in real life, like they were, super quiet. I had to ask them like 50 questions. And then I don't know, like that right away, just like, I just like don't want to continue things. I mean, even though I think that's not really, I don't know, it's not really valid. Like you should maybe they're just nervous, right, on a first date. But for me, like this like switch like turns off. I'm like, like that was, I don't know.
I think that's true both in your 20s and 30s, but yeah, for sure, it's a huge turnoff in any date when they can't make conversation. But something I heard from a girl before was that they have this, their philosophy or their rule essentially is that they always go on a second date if the opportunity presents itself, even if the first date is horrible. You'd be like, I will always force myself to go on a second date. You don't force yourself to go on a third date, but always a second date. And for that reason, in that like, always, give both you and the other person at least one more chance to do something. Because as you said, your first dates are it's very nerve wracking.
Yeah.
And you might come to conclusions or judgments that are wrong because it's just first impression. So
I do always say yes to a second for sure, but and then after that, because I mean exactly that.
No,
you just
I
never
don't do that.
You really
yeah.
So they'll ask you on a second date and you're like, no.
I'm like, nah. Yeah.
Oh my
basically
gosh.
they're like, I enjoy myself, like I hope I can, let's do it again soon, or I look forward to seeing you again, whatever. Like I'm like, yeah, nah. I say it as politely as possible, but I say no,
oh
thank you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. I mean, we haven't talked about rejection or ghosting or all that stuff, but I don't know. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory in that ghosting sucks and
ghosting sucks. But I have I've both been on the receiving end and occasionally on the giving end. I'll admit.
The mutual ghost is the best, but
the mutual ghost,
yeah.
Where
it mutually dies down.
You both go on a date and you both hated it, and you don't have to do anything about it because you're hoping that person doesn't message you. Yeah. And then the other person's also hoping you don't message them, and then you're like, oh wow, we both hated it.
That was mutual. That's the best. It's the best case scenario. That's so funny. So funny. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was fun. That's good. I wonder if anyone has any experiences or thoughts about how their dating life has changed in the 30s and 20s. Let us know. It's always fun to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. It's one of those things that is like, like I said at the beginning, is so noticeably different, I think, between my 20s and my 30s.
Very different. All right. Well, I don't do the spiel anymore, but if you enjoy this conversation and our podcast, give us a rating. We want to grow our podcast, and so the best way to do that is if you share this with a friend or two. So quickly
give us a like, leave us a comment. I mean, we always say this and we never really get them, but if you have any like stories that you'd like to share, message us. We will, we'll talk about it in a future episode. Yeah. All right. I guess with that, we can wrap it up. So
wrap it up.
Talk to you next week.
Enjoy the rest of just another week or so in January. So Chinese New Year is coming. I hope we can finally stop saying Happy New Year soon. Yay.
Yay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye.